Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the 7th meeting of the second season of the International Workshop on Environment, Sustainability, and Education. My name is Oren Pizmoni-Levy. I'm a faculty at Teachers College, Columbia University, where I'm leading the Center for Sustainable Futures. And together with my partner in crime, Daphna Gan from the Kibbutzim College, the Israeli Institute of Education for Sustainability, we're very happy to welcome you to this session. The International Workshop is a co-production of our two institutions. We've been going on for 2 years, and we are very happy to see every session new people, new questions, new ideas around the intersection of environment, sustainability, and education. If you would like to watch previous sessions that we had, you can go to YouTube and find it on YouTube. I'm going to put the link in the chat box. Everything is available for free. Here we go. And we will really appreciate if you will share the links with your contacts so other people will view it and use it. And if you are using it in your teaching or in your research seminars or with your students, we would love to hear about that. We have a session coming up in May 25th, that will be next month, where we are hosting colleagues to talk about assessment, international assessment and sustainability. So we will send out an invitation. But if you're interested in sharing your own work at the workshop, please don't be shy and contact us through email. You can also send me a chat here so we can follow up with you. We are looking for speakers for the next season, starting next year. Today's session, as you all know, is titled From Grassroots to Global Policy, Mapping the Education Landscape of the Earth Day organization, with the speaker, Matthew Aruk. Matt, who I know for many, many years from CIS, is a PhD and is currently leading the Global Education Unit at earthday.org. He's a career educator, worked alongside communities, schools, universities, NGOs, and government agencies to develop, implement, and evaluate a comprehensive set of K-16 education activities in the United States and abroad. Before joining the Earth Day organization, he was an assistant director of the College Park Scholars Science, Technology, and Society program and senior lecturer in the A. James Clark Engineering School. Matt worked with George Washington University, the Protected Forest Association in Brazil, the University in Ecuador, the Inter-American Development Bank, Boston Public School Office of English Language Learners, and Alexandria City Public Schools. This is only partial list. We are very happy to have Matt. Matt is going to speak for around 20 minutes, then we'll open for Q&A. And as always, we will go for small breakout rooms where people will have an opportunity to meet other colleagues and to discuss a couple of questions that Matt put for us. So thank you everybody for joining us. Matt, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Oren. Let me just get my screen up here. Make sure all my Zoom boxes are in the right spot. And I'm going to hit my timer. So, excuse me. Thank you again for joining us this morning, afternoon, this evening. Like Oren said, I'm Matt, I'm the Director of Global Education. And of course, this presentation was not created just by me. It was made with contributions from and behalf of my colleagues with the Earth Day organization, some of whom are here joining us. So a shout out to the rest of the Global Education program at the Earth Day organization. So the presentation, I'll start here with a little bit of warm up. It's 3, 2, 1 chat box. So what is your first Earth Day memory? So I'll just kind of count down from 3 and then just throw them into the chat box. It'll be interesting to see what folks have these first memories of. So 3, 2, 1. Go ahead, throw them in there. Let's see. what folks have been doing on Earth Day. A lot of cleanups, March for Science, posters, planting trees. Great. I know I have some school age Earth Day memories, but my first like vivid Earth Day memory is on the mall in Washington, DC, and it's a Flaming Lips concert where the lead singer basically was like, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to do this anyway. And they have these streamers of plastic that they then like shot all over the mall in downtown DC. So a lot of tree planting, and we still do a lot of tree planting and a lot of cleaning up, cleanups, and a lot of posters. And so here I'm going to talk specifically about the education program, which is kind of at the core of the Earth Day organization and Earth Day itself. So quick agenda, we'll kind of start at the beginning, and then at the end, I'll walk us through the history, and then in the end, we'll get to what I hope or what I think is a path forward for the education program, and give all of you some ways to get involved with the organization and with Earth Day in 2022. So first I want to tell you a little bit of my story and kind of how I got to Earth Day. I was a middle school science teacher in Alexandria City. Here I am with that beautiful yet thinning rapidly curly locks. I'm in a school gymnasium about to have my head shaved by a bunch of middle school students. I left the classroom and went to graduate school, first at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and then to do my PhD at the University of Maryland, where I got involved in all kinds of stuff, robotics, working with indigenous communities in Brazil and in Ecuador. And then I eventually went off to do my dissertation in Brazil alongside the Babengo Kaipo. That could be another one of these presentations, and graduated in the midst of the pandemic in 2020. And the programs that I had developed as a lecturer at UMD, the service learning programs and the global learning programs, were all kind of shaken up by our new COVID reality. And having just graduated and having all those programs shook up, I decided to shake everything up and shifted to earthday.org to do this global education stuff. So on the left, you kind of see how it started. And here on the right, if my photos will load, you can see how I ended up. So that's a nice little photo of my two boys. And this is an exercise for me to understand, you know, what are my roles and responsibilities in my job? And I undertook this kind of looking at institutional documents, looking at board reports, strategic plans, documents, memos, old presentations, meeting notes. And I'm trying to figure out kind of what are the through lines in the education program? What is the history of this program? How can we bring it forward? What things should be continued? What things need to be reinvigorated? What things might need to be dropped? And I'm kind of an insider, right? So I am in the organization, but an outsider because I'm new to the organization. And the same goes for this presentation, right? So I do need to kind of speak on behalf of the organization and take a kind of toe the line in terms of how critical I can be of the institution, while also bringing that critical lens to this kind of more academic setting and audience. So I'll do my best to kind of bring all these viewpoints into this presentation. But what I think everyone will see is as you look at the mission statements and objectives of education over time, you'll see kind of how they evolve from this kind of very core identity into this more kind of global dispersed set of program activities. So what is Earth Day organization? It grew out of the first Earth Day in 1970. We work with more than 75,000 partners in over 190 countries. Please don't ask me to verify those. These are the organization's documents. And the mission is to diversify, educate, and activate the world's largest environmental movement. And you can see some of the engagement opportunities here in the background. And the first Earth Day was a teach-in, right? So Senator Gaylord Nelson with Dennis Hayes, they organized a national teach-in for the environment and rallied 20 million people to the streets around the country. And this kind of ushered in an era of environmental action and civic engagement. And you can see kind of a whole kind of swath of environmental legislation that came through Congress soon thereafter, right? The EPA was formed, the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Acts, all kind of in the aftermath of this first Earth Day organization. So the Earth Day organization, previously, the Earth Day Network, was formally established in 1989 in New York City. Now we're based in Washington, D.C. And in 1991, this education program started. So this comes from an old fax from a donor. And it was a combination of education, public policy, and consumer campaigns. And then in the strategic documents, more recent, you can see kind of how Earth Day thinks about the organization. So looking at this globally celebrated and beloved brand, Earth Day, as a mechanism to catalyze engagement around a myriad of issues on Earth Day every day. So we started in 1989 with a focus on New York City, and now we have this kind of really big global focus 30 years later. So the first thing that the education program did, and I apologize for this graphic, but I could not help myself, was to send out educational content to public, private, and parochial schools, first around New York City, and then later around 13 states, and then to the country. And what they did was they mailed a letter to every principal in the United States to sign up an Earth Day coordinator in their school. And they had a system of mailing out envelopes and then mailing out packages to all of these schools. And the objectives at this point were to make top-notch quality or top quality environmental education materials widely available. They wanted to enhance students' the ability to analyze and solve environmental problems, and they wanted to make environmental studies interesting and relevant to all. The next stage, they kind of moved from just content into more civic action. So the list got to about 95,000 educators, representing about 70% of all schools in the United States. They started to think about global opportunities in the web, and also how to create engaged citizens, right? So developing the next generation of environmentalists, building a constituents who are prepared to buy and vote the environment, so bringing in this green economies, and then develop citizen schools. And they started to think about these global opportunities in other countries. I'm speeding through this a little bit so we can get to the later parts. I know I'm a little bit pressed for time already. The next shift is starting to move into kind of green school infrastructure and legislative advocacy, right? So EarthDay.org was instrumental in creating the Green Ribbon Schools program that's now hosted with the Department of Education. They did a number of green infrastructure projects. This was funded by the National Civic Education Project as well as corporate donors, and with the objective of greening every school within a generation. So they really got heavily involved in the public policy arena, specifically in the United States, and began to kind of grow this global network of 11,000 plus institutions. In 2010, the decision was made to go global. And they started with a few decentralized coordinated teams. First was the India team, which is now the South and Southeast Asia team, as well as a team set in the Middle East and North Africa. The South America and Sub-Saharan Africa team came on formally in 2020 with the 50th anniversary. But what we see when we go global is this kind of partnership and program proliferation that starts to take place, as well as this mission shifts that goes from revitalizing to grow, revitalize, and diversify the environmental education community in both the United States and abroad, from educating and activating to also creating green businesses, entrepreneurs, and consumers. So again, these kind of two-pronged mission away from or including education, but also bringing in these kind of green economies. So I'll talk a little bit about the global programs. The first one is truly a global program, and this was started by the team in India. and South and Southeast Asia. It's the My Future, My Voice Ambassadors program, but has now since spread to close to 100 countries, if not more than 100 countries across 6 continents. This is our network of youth activists, right? So you can see the map here of where they are. And these folks are incredible. They do speaker events with us. They lead speaker events. And so this is a place where I think our education team really has an opportunity to kind of bring these youth activists in, find out the good work that they're doing, amplify their good work, and also support them as they move along their professional trajectories. So you can see here kind of a little bit of introduction to the Asia team in India, working with teachers and students all over the country. There are in other countries, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Malaysia. Middle East and North Africa program is also a very strong program. They work primarily from the top down and the bottom up, so working with government partners to influence policy decisions and school leaders, as well as working from the bottom up with large NGO groups that can influence activities such as the tree planting and the cleanups that folks mentioned earlier, with a specific focus on the engagement of women and girls. Our South America team and Rodolfo Beltran is here on the call, so you can, if you're in a breakout room with him, you can ask him more specifically. He works across these multiple levels of interconnection. So working with regional governance organizations, national governments, subnational governments, municipal governments, local actors, and Native groups and indigenous groups as well, with the objective to bring together both sets of perspectives in promoting an environmental agenda. And you can see a bunch of programs here. And left out here is youth activism. Rodolfo is a big advocate for youth in the region, really promoting their work and influence around South America. The Sub-Saharan Africa team similarly is working across the region. We have staff in Tanzania, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. And they also mobilize government actors and non-state actors, volunteers. Again, youth activism is a big part of this program. And here are some of the programs they work on. So we get to kind of the current set of programming. So this is a big, broad set of activities. We started by mailing curriculum out to schools, generating resources and content. We're doing some legislative, policy, lobbying, and advocacy work. We're supporting and backstopping global programming that are kind of decentralized, but coordinated. So the previous education director began to consolidate some of these resources, these education resources, to find them in a single place. And I can share that kind of resource library at the end of the presentation. We continue to kind of press on US policy action, working with the Department of Education to think more critically about how to include climate education in schools or environmental education in schools with a climate focus, or sustainability education. The terminology is sometimes challenging when you get into the political arena. And then we also participate in a number of kind of peer climate change education policy groups, kind of thinking more about what the agenda should be at the kind of local, national, region, or international scales, right? We also began to kind of dip our toe as an organization into this global climate education policy arena. And you can see here that the mission statement now reflects this shift toward the global. And this is the original mission statement from earlier. EarthDay.org's mission to diversify, educate, and activate the environmental movement worldwide. It's the world's largest recruiter to the environmental movement, with more than 150,000 partners in 192 countries. So really leaning into our role as a global organization. So you can see kind of this resource consolidation. We have Earth Day schools around the world. We have a bunch of resources for folks at all levels. In 2022, we build content around our theme. This year, our theme is Invest in Our Planet. And we can talk about that at the end of the presentation if folks are interested. Here are some of the kind of thematic areas we work on related to education. So developing tools for global teach-ins. We have a citizen science app with this alongside the State Department and the Wilson Center. Climate and environmental literacy, which is what I'll talk about in a second. The resources, and Mobilize U, which is our university program for students to kind of generate buzz and action around Earth Day. So the big campaign that we work on currently and that we'll continue to work on through 2022 and 2023 and beyond is this climate and environmental literacy campaign. And that's with the goal of ensuring that every learner, every school in the world has a fully integrated climate environmental education with a civic engagement component. So we're trying to influence governments and policymakers to ensure that all students and teachers and all learners everywhere, right? It doesn't matter, have access to this form of education. And so in 2020, 2021, the focus was on gathering up support. And we did that through a petition that we sent out to peer organizations as well as to individuals. So this petition was brought to the COP in Glasgow in 2021. So you can see kind of the framing there, and delivered to the executive secretary of the UNFCCC. And to date, we have 250 million signatories, and that includes kind of representation from labor unions, teachers unions, and other large groups, right? So this, those organizations have signed on behalf of their members, as well as more than 5,000 individuals, and I checked yesterday to see this, and 126 countries. So there is some kind of global movement, global momentum around driving this action. Here are some of the partner groups that signed on to our letter. You can see some of the big ones here are the Teachers Unions, National Education Association, Education International, American Federation of Teachers, and so on. So to kind of bring it all back, we've walked through a long history of Earth Day. There are a couple of through lines that I tried to pull out, right? First is that we are always providing free, accessible education content for students and teachers now globally. There's been a focus on civic engagement and citizenship education, green school infrastructure, entrepreneurship, climate and environmental literacy. That's a more recent, but it's a through line for about a decade now. And then these policy and advocacy work. This is like the least fully formed part of this presentation because I'm still trying to kind of figure out what are the pieces of the program. So that's my note down there. But there's some of the through lines that run through the history of the education program. There are a number of ongoing tensions that came also out of these documents, right? So the mission alignment. So where does the education program fit within, alongside, in tension with the bigger organization, right? We mentioned these global cleanups. We mentioned these tree plantings. You know, that is peripheral to the education program, at least in my view, right? It sits kind of with us, but oftentimes we get pulled in to create education content specifically for kinds of things that may not be core to what the education program mission might be, right? So what's our core value proposition? What's our identity? Thinking about it in terms of content, communications, policy, and advocacy. The other thing that I think is challenging right now is like, we're doing this advocacy around climate literacy, but how do we define it so that it's relevant across these global contexts? So that we can have an outcome with local and contextual, very technical term of squishiness, right? And trying to craft some of these policy interventions using North American tools may also be something that creates some tension with our global teams or our global partners. And so as you can see as well, this kind of proliferation of activities is a broad scope. And so the organizational capacity is not always there to do all of these things at once. Right now, I am the global education team based in Washington, D.C. We work with partners around the globe, but it's hard to kind of do all of these things really well without some specialists in each of these areas. So some challenges, right? Some things that I talked about, right? We have broad scope, but we can only kind of get in this far unless we have some specialized people in each of these areas. The staffing, program sustainability. So if you look at the history, right, programs start and stop. I see a question here about collaborations in China. There's some commentary in some of these documents about starting programs in China, but I'm not exactly sure how they ended up. Monitoring the uptake of our resources and how they're used in the classroom. So these are some challenges that we face as a small, nimble organization, but things that we may want to address. On the other hand, we have excuse me, a ton of opportunities. So we have a really big partner network. We have a global reach. We have a recognized brand. I imagine that's why many folks are here with us this morning or this afternoon or this evening. We have a strong media and communications team. And we're often ahead of the curve on some of these issues, right? So if we think about the green schools and greening of schools, climate literacy, thinking about green entrepreneurship and green economies in the future, this is stuff that Earth Day was talking about, maybe perhaps not first, but really on the leading edge of these conversations in the domestic community in the United States and more globally with our partners. So it's an incomplete snapshot just to give everyone a kind of quick view of where we were. Just out of time, and I'm just at the end. So I'll finish up in about a minute. So you can see some of these success and challenges. I'm happy to go back to this if folks want to dig in on here for questions in a moment. And here are some of my ideas for a pathway forward. So thinking critically about the dimensions or mindsets of climate literacy, and this is one of the discussion questions, right? What if we achieve our goal? What does that look like? What kinds of behaviors are we seeing and attitudes and knowledge? So we see in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, carving out a distinct identity within the organization. So what's the story of education? And hopefully I've been able to start to tell it here. We've consolidated our resources, but we have also like this proliferation of web pages all over the place. So bringing all those in so that if people come to visit an earthday.org/education page, they can then link out to all the content related to education. Something really important, leveraging our brand for justice. So how do we kind of use our tools to locate, curate, center, network, marginalized voices and perspectives, creating processes for reciprocal and sustainable partnerships. And that's something that's I'll ask you all to discuss as well. Supporting and developing our networks. And then of course, this is an issue for all NGOs and probably all groups everywhere, finding some sustainable funding. So if you're out there in this audience and you have a bunch of sustainable funding for me to grow this education team, please reach out. I'm happy to hear from you. I'll put it to good work, I promise. And here are some tools and strategies, and I'll copy and paste this into the chat in a minute so everyone can click on these links. But if you want to register or participate in Earth Day for 2022. So that is all for me. This is my email. Feel free to reach out and get in touch. I'm always happy to hear from folks, partner with folks, collaborate with folks. And I'm looking forward to your questions and discussion. Thank you all very much. I'll stop sharing now and I'll drop those links into the chat.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt, for this very interesting overview of what earthday.org is doing. I'm sure many people have questions. I know I do, but I'm going to wait. Let's start with a couple of questions from the audience. If you want to raise your hand, and I'll call you up. So we'll have some queue. Please, Will.
Hi, Matt. My name is Will Freund. I'm with the Redford Center based out in California. I'm in North Carolina, though. I'm really curious on a lot of the work that Earth Day is doing and supporting, in your mind, where does visual storytelling fit into the mission of Earth Day?
Great question. So we have a really strong media and communications team, and I mean, the organization has been doing visual storytelling for a long time, right? And more recently, I think they've just become stronger and stronger. So when COVID struck, Earth Day went digital, right? So the last 2 years have been entirely virtual Earth Days, where this kind of digital storytelling was an essential component of crafting the events. Specific to education, and it's a work in progress. I won't name organizations, but we've been working with a group of youth activists around crafting a video message on their demands for climate education. So coming up with a script, and I know this is recorded, but who cares? Do you remember that terrifying video that came out a few years ago about the media conglomerate that took over local media in the United States? And it was just like everyone saying the same thing. It didn't matter if you were in North Carolina or New York or California. Anyway, the idea behind the concept behind the video is that all of these youth activists will have the same script and will be able to amplify their demands in a way that kind of starts with one person and moves it out. So that's the kind of digital storytelling that we've been doing, but also the creative team is doing all kinds of fun stuff. I don't know if that answers your question. Well, I'm not a digital media person. We have other people on our team who are more qualified to answer that question, but we do it. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Will. I see a question, Matt, in the chat from Natalia, wondering if the network is mainly focused on the US or it's more of a global organization. I think you touched a little bit on this theme in your talk.
Yes, we are very much a global organization. We have, I don't want to call it the headquarters, but the kind of anchor is in Washington, DC, but we have teams that are based in, for example, Rodolfo, who's here, he's in Sao Paulo. We have a team in Tanzania. We have a team in India. We have a team in Uganda. We have a team in Zimbabwe. We have some folks kind of scattered around in Europe. So in addition to the kind of staff of Earth Day, we have networks and partners in 180, 190 countries, if there are even that many countries. How many countries did I say before? I'm losing my train of thought. It's early here. But yeah, we have partners all over the world, and if you're interested, just get in touch, and we're happy to speak with you to get you more engaged. 126 countries. Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you so much, Natalia. Any other questions from the audience? We have a couple of very concrete questions in the chat box. If you can suggest some sustainable constructions ideas in monsoon land. It seems to be that's beyond the education work of Earth Day, right?
I would talk to an engineer about that. Unfortunately, I've never built any infrastructure on monsoon lands at this stage of my career.
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet.
Any other questions from the audience? Virginia. We can't hear you though. No. Why don't you solve that technical issue, and I'll move to Bob. Bob, go ahead.
Great presentation, Matt. What do you know or not know about the needs for working teachers to have more extensive prep to teach? Do you yourselves, Earth Day or other sister organizations, organize 1 to 5 day intensives for teachers during summer to prepare them to be more confident delivering this kind of curriculum?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. And the short answer is that we know teachers need additional supports to be comfortable teaching some of this content, right? But that's another thing that's kind of beyond the kind of capacity for the organization to do, right? So we're not out there doing teacher trainings. We're providing content. So one of the things that we can do, right, is we can influence and pressure. And I think one of the leverage points, and Oren and Dr. Jing Lin, who is my PhD advisor, had a talk a few weeks ago. Maybe it was in this forum, maybe it was a different forum, on how teachers, colleges, and teacher training programs can bring these ideas into teacher prep programs, right? So I think that's an area where this needs to be part. And again, speaking to the same organization that Will noted, they were wondering how to get teachers and schools shook up. And I said, they're a global organization. I said, you got to get to the OECD and you got to convince the PISA folks to put climate education on the PISA exams. And at some point, it's going to trickle down, because all of these policymakers are going to want it. They're going to want to see if that's going to rank them lower because their students are not climate literate, right? They're going to pay attention and start to infuse that stuff into their schools. So that's like another place that we might be able to do some advocacy work in order to ensure that teachers are provided with the supports they need and also the incentives they need to bring this stuff into their classroom. So I don't have a great answer to whether or not we're doing it, but those are some of the ideas that I've thought about.
Great, thank you, Bob. Virginia, are you okay with your question?
I was just going to say that Bob had written a question on top, and but he asked the question. It's all good.
So Matt, let me ask you a question. I'm just trying to format it in a accessible way. Yes, let's take a critical perspective for a second on this. Why would countries worldwide follow an American model of intervention in the area of education, when we know from comparative education, a field that both you and I were trained in, is that education is so cultural nested, right? That it's like the metaphor of the plants. You can't take the plant and move it from one soil to another and expect it to be successful. The soil around it is really, really important in terms of nurturing the education intervention. So why would we want to see interventions coming from the US, a country that is mediocre when it's coming to PISA ranking or TIMSS that you mentioned, and not really forward thinking in terms of sustainability? Why would we like to export interventions from here to the rest of the world? Why is that a good thing?
Yeah, I don't know if it is, but I do think that Earth Day as an event is not uniquely a Western construction, right? So if we look at kind of cultural practices around the world, many of them have a celebration of the earth, right? In Israel, right, we just passed like Tu B'Shvat, right? So it's a tree day, which might as well be Earth Day, right? And so this kind of construction of kind of celebrating the earth, I don't think is particularly unique to the West. I think it's nice to have some of the backbone to support, but as I noted in the presentation, and this is one of the tensions in the organization, right, is how do we give our global teams enough kind of coordinated autonomy to develop programs that are relevant within their context, while also providing them with the support and structure of a kind of DC-based institution. And that's, one of the challenges and opportunities of the organization, right? So, I shouldn't say my favorite part, but I'll say it. My favorite part of my role thus far has been working with the global teams, right? The networks that they've cultivated and and I hate that word, sorry, let me pull that word back. The networks that they work with and that they partner with and they collaborate with around environmental activism, it's not just education stuff, are incredible. They're doing amazing things. And none of us have a ton of resources, and they're able to kind of work with their relationships and their families and colleagues and friends and instructors to do all kinds of great work. And because they're kind of away from the kind of centralized location, they're given a lot of autonomy there. And then it's up to us, right, to support them and then also learn and bring some of those ideas. The team that's based out of India has a number of successful programs. My Future, My Voice, for example, that started there and has just now scaled out rapidly around the world. So I don't think necessarily we're trying to impose kind of a North American or Western idea of education on these global teams, but thinking about how we can use Earth Day as a mechanism for galvanizing a global movement around environmental education. This becomes a bigger issue when we get into that climate education policy arena, and you know, there are rules within that game that are often constructed by North American, European policymakers, right? And then you have to play by those rules in order to get and seat at the table. But I think that programmatically, it's a little bit more, you know, coordinated but decentralized.
Great. Any other question from the audience before we move to breakout rooms? Okay. So Matt prepared for us a set of 3 major questions with some follow-ups. I invite everybody to give a look. I'm going to put it in the chat box as well. And we are going to spend some time in small groups to discuss this. It's now 9:45 my time. Daphne will give it around 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
Yeah, 20.
Okay,
25, yes, 25.
And then we'll come back for more discussion. So
and sustainability during all year, and maybe to do more specials day in the year, but this special day, the Earth Day, should be something that it is special, but it is something that takes what we did all year about the Earth.
great.
Teaching,
so much.
learning activities, just to make it as a day that we can enlighten some problems that we dealt with during the year.
Thank you so much, Tammy. That was great. Second room, we had Bob, Jean, Liat, Maria, Naama, Ortal, Sue, Virginia, and Active Sundays. Anyone want to share?
I will start. And then you got, I know everybody can add something. So we talked about question number 2 about what to teach, when to teach in the classroom. And I started saying that I believe that, you know, the little ones first have to create, well, we have to help them create this love for the earth. And then as they progress in age, no small problems, and then more bigger and bigger problems, and then they can be advocate for the earth. Sue, do you want to add your ideas?
Yeah, and I've been listening because all of these stories of what people are doing from preschool through graduate school are part of a story that we're trying to tell as a collaborative storytelling adventure, trying to put it into a context. I think that working with Matt and the University of Florida and others, we could really do something wonderful. And I love knowing that you guys are at the University of Maryland, because I've got a wonderful connection there too. So I'm going to put into the chat my
Thank you so much, Sue and Virginia. Anyone else from group 2? Okay. Moving to group 3, we had Ibrahim, Ella, Matt, Nerissa, Rodolfo, and Shanghi. Anyone would like to share? Okay, that's the quiet group. Matt, go ahead.
I've spoken enough. I'm curious if anyone else in the group wants
I
to.
can summarize the main points. So basically, in our group, we discussed the importance of shifting from knowledge level to changing attitudes, behaviors, and actions, and not forgetting the important aspect of values. Where we're just envisioning creating those critical consumers who would be evaluating and taking decisions in an informed way, and increasing the sense of, like we talked about what is missing in the public. So basically the sense of advocacy, activism, sense of belonging. I don't know if you want to talk about it more, and integrating this whole thing in civic education so that we have more action on the field.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's move quickly to room number 4 and 5 so we can have more time for Q&A. But room number 4 was Ariella, Bijiana, Daphna, Kudipa, Mihaela, Tumani, and Will. If one of you want to share, Will, I see that you're on mute. Go ahead.
Yeah, we kind of touched on each of the questions, but really one of the main things that I think I'm taking away from this is that there is already a start in terms of partnerships and collaborations that we think both so often about, you know, our organizational partnerships, but also we need to think, and I heard evidence of more of our community partnerships, both like within classroom to classroom, but then also classrooms with their families. Ariella can speak to this more, but just like more of, you know, reaching out not only to the students, but then to the students and families and engaging them into these conversations, because then that creates an intergenerational conversation, not just one within one generation. And I found that really, really awesome and a powerful way to explore education.
Wonderful. Anyone else from group 4? Okay. Group 5, we had Efrat, Laura, Lilach, Neta, Sheila, Shemuli, and Vineta. Anyone? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
If nobody will say anything, I'll say.
Please go ahead.
Okay, in our group, we were, you know, like 7 of us in that group, and it was like a little motley group. I from an NGO, another one was a nurse, and there was third person who's teaching in college, and others were students. And we had kind of come into the group to learn about what you're doing, and 2 of us did not listen to the talk. We joined the session too late. But we presume that you want to talk about climate literacy and to take climate literacy to the schools and integrate it into their education. Am I right in thinking this?
Is that a question?
Yeah, it is a question. It is a question because then one can give something of little value to you. Otherwise, we didn't quite know what to say for all the 3 questions, because yes, Earth Day is relevant. Yes, we care about the Earth, and we think Earth Day is every day. All this we agreed with. But we thought that you had a focus, because we can't focus on everything, and we thought your focus was climate literacy, or at least I thought that. And I am in touch with a lot of educators who want to learn about activities and things to take, to teach children and to do with the children, climate literacy programs, which is why I participated in this program.
Matt, would you like to respond, or should we take another comment from the group?
Yeah, I'll just respond quickly to say that, yeah, the talk was a little bit more broad in scope around education programming at earthday.org, but yeah, the last little bit was focused on, and a large focus of the work now is on climate and environmental literacy. So as you noted, ensuring that all students have access to fully integrated climate and environmental literacy programming. I'll stop there.
Great. Sheila, would you like to join the comments from group 5?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for naming me to say something. I'm from Taiwan and the faculty from Medical University, but I'm teaching general education. I'm actually from higher ed. In the recent 2 years or 3, I continuing led my students to a community in a big city, but at the outskirts of the city, where is the industrial park for decades. However, the industrial park is developed in a traditional fishery village, which is used to be very prosperous. So now the village is still there with around 20,000 residents still there. But around this community, there are 871 industrial chimneys. Can you imagine? So the air you breathe, the water you drink, maybe because of PM 2.5 or PM 10, the health, the residents really suffer from health injustice, not to say environmental injustice. The government has continually negotiate how to move this entire village to another place. But moving itself is complicated to start with, but moving doesn't mean that will improve the environment. It's just easier for the local government to do more developments for, for economic growth. But when we have the dilemma between economic growth and environmental justice, it's a tough issue. So I actually want to ask, what would you think about this, the moderator, and maybe from the audience? It seems to me is a dead end. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Matt, would you like to speak about this tension between economic growth on one hand as a global agenda that is very dominant, and on the other hand, this idea that we need to actually preserve resources, and how do we do both of them together? I will just add to what Sheila was saying, is that the problem with education these days is that the discourse is connecting education and economic development almost as one-to-one. That's the discourse behind PISA and TIMSS and all of that. And I really wonder how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge in our organization as well. So one of the things we talked about in our group was talking about how, and we attacked question 2, and it was like, well, what does success look like? And success is really hard, even if you can reform the education system, which is a monumental task in itself, it's still nested within a political and economic system that values consumption, right? So, and the example that I pointed to, right, and this is not a great example, there's a whole bunch of other geopolitical influences driving this, but we know the Biden administration is talking about climate change and providing the United States with the tools to combat climate change. And we know there's a war in Ukraine, but the policy intervention was to release 1 billion more barrels of oil into the economy because oil prices are going up, right? Those two bits of things are related. They're not separate, right? And so like if we're like nested in a school system, but then you leave school and you go back into this political economic system, then what can the school really do? And so it's not a technical problem, it's a social problem or a socio-technical problem. And we need to start thinking about the systems inside which these issues are embedded in order to find the right levers. And I don't have a great answer to your question. And the organization is grappling with that as well. And I mean, if you look at our theme for this year, which is invest in our planet, a lot of the narrative we talk about is around engaging businesses to think about green technologies. And while that's an important component, perhaps, I often bring this other perspective, which is we need to shift the investment away from financial investments into human investments, right? So investing in yourself, investing in your family, investing in your community, investing in, you know, other things where you can see a return on the kind of socio-environmental investment instead of just the financial investment for better green technologies or ESG financial arrangements or what have you, right? So, you know, that's a tension that we face in the organization as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. But could I push the discourse further? Can I have one more question for you?
Please, please.
Yeah, but to what extent should we invest ourselves instead of invest in economic growth? I mean, that's what is a dilemma, because for a country like Taiwan, and we're an island country, you know, economic growth really is a major issue because I think every little country wants to be seen through, like, you know, we produce a lot of technical elements and so we are very well known in specific area, but with a high price, because a lot of land maybe for farming land were transferred into economic industrial park. And so it's important to invest in ourselves because, you know, health is priceless, but sometimes priceless is it's really no price, or it doesn't mean anything, so it's priceless. So to what extent should we invest in ourselves instead of investing in economy? So what would you say about this? Especially when school kids bring this up, what would you answer? Thank you.
I think this is a wonderful question to ponder on, and maybe we can ask other people, not only Matt, to respond, because it's a question for many educators. We have 2 more minutes if people want to take the opportunity to discuss this.
So really quick, I would like to really bring in that when we're talking of all this, I feel as an educator, I like what you said, Sheila, that in ourself, and ourself means I really take it to very, very personal level as me. And how can I do as an educator the same to my students or anybody in the community, that the love for nature, the love and the understanding, it's not just the science of learning how it works, but the love for, you know, how things work and how we are interconnected. Mm-hmm. And I feel once we address that question of, you know, making them love things, what they're doing, and understanding that they are existing because of the things around, I think the change is going to come from within each one of us. It's not the policymakers or government or teachers, but it's each one of us. And how I think the focus should be, how can each one of us like create that love in everyone for, you know, the things that are living around. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's quite a kind of reminder. Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, one briefly thing. Hi, guys. You know, the thing about the Earth Day, for example, we decide in the schools that it needs to be a day of awareness. and awareness of ourselves, what we are doing, what we are not, what we really can do. A lot of parents were very concerned about the kids will be very stressed, with all these environmental things. And we were like, well, it depends on the age, is the way that we are gonna talk to them, the subjects, the books, the activities, but it's most about what really realistically you can do in your little corner of the world, no? And it looks like it's working, and because we cannot wait until the school system switch to all this climate action, we adopt the Earth Day like an activity at the school that really can engage not just the individuals, also the full community, and it's working. It is not easy, but we are gonna have a talk with the superintendent from the district to see if all the schools now can connect that day in a way to the gardens, to the books, something. I think to run into the desperation is not gonna give us a good end, and to be a little bit more zen and realistic. And the roll is already rolling. The ball is already rolling, rolling. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much,
Excuse
Jeanette.
me. Yeah, before we leave, can I share a quick thing? Just to thank everyone. My name is Mahabat. I'm from Kyrgyzstan, and I just want to share that I was so happy to listen all these ideas, and I'm more than happy and proud that we are on the right track, because we are sharing to students from grade 2 and act locally and think globally. This is our main motto. So whatever we're teaching in the classroom and what projects we're doing right now, this all Save the Planet based idea. So thank you so much for this opportunity to listen to other educators as well.
Thank you so much. That will be a wonderful way to conclude this session.